Welcome to the Hilleberg Saivo, an exceptionally strong, utterly reliable tent for any situation, any weather, anywhere. Built with some of our strongest materials, the all-season Saivo will handle the very worst storm conditions and provide the utmost security and comfort in both the most and the least demanding weather conditions. Available in both a 3- and a 4-person version, the Saivo is remarkably roomy and comfortable, and makes an excellent choice for anything from remote mountaineering expeditions to winter ski tours and summer paddling adventures to fine weather family outings. We're using the 3-person Saivo 3 in this video, but since setup for the 4-person Saivo 4 is exactly the same, we refer to the tent throughout simply as the Saivo. This video covers everything you need to know about pitching the Saivo. We recommend that you watch this video carefully, look over the instruction booklet included with your Saivo, and that you practice pitching and using your tent before your first backcountry trip. Introduction to the Saivo. The Saivo is part of our all-season Black Label series, which is home to our most robust tents. All Black Label tents are constructed of our Kirlon 1800 outer tent fabric and 10mm DAC Featherlight NSL poles. Like all Hilleberg tents, the Saivo has linked but separable inner and outer tents, providing either simultaneous pitching or separate use for the greatest versatility. And as with all Hilleberg all-season tents, the Saivo's outer tent walls go all the way to the ground for maximum weather protection. All mesh areas are backed with adjustable fabric panels to keep snow and rain out of the inner tent and for variable venting, and there are multiple vents high up for ventilation even in deep snow or high brush conditions. Because Black Label tents are built with some of our strongest materials, they offer the highest margin of safety for all users, which means they are ideal for both the very experienced users traveling in demanding conditions and less experienced users who simply want the safest, most functional tent. The Saivo has 2 entrances and 2 vestibules, one standard sized and one larger one with an additional pole. The 2 entrance and 2 vestibule configuration offers flexible entry and exit options and great storage space. And while the structure itself is self-supporting, you will need to peg out both of the vestibules. Included with the Saivo is a tent bag, the tent with attached guy lines and line runners, a pole bag, 5 poles, 1 spare pole section with a repair sleeve, a peg bag with 26 pegs, and an instruction booklet. Other accessories available for purchase include pole holders for pitching the inner tent separately, a footprint, tarps and trekking poles, as well as extra pegs, guy line runners, and reflective cord. Pitching the Saivo. The Saivo is built for handling the most demanding conditions. But whether you pitch it in fine weather or in stormy conditions, the setup is essentially the same. A few small changes for rough weather pitching ensure the most successful setup despite high winds. Remember that weather in the backcountry can change unexpectedly, so becoming comfortable in your pitching routine ahead of time means you will be prepared for any conditions you might encounter. However you pitch your tent, the process should feel smooth throughout, almost like second nature, and you should be consistent in these steps every time. Regardless of the conditions, start by finding a level spot that is free of stones and other sharp objects. Before laying out the tent, peg out 1 guy line to keep the tent from flying away if the wind comes up suddenly. In this video, we're using the guy line from the standard vestibule's vent hood, and we strongly recommend you always use this guy line. You'll have to pre-pack your tent to leave this line easily accessible, and we cover how to do this in detail in the Taking Down the Saivo section. Be sure that you also secure your pole and peg bags as you use them. Lay out your tent with its standard vestibule facing into the direction of the wind. Note that the larger vestibule with a pole has a red webbing band on its pole sleeve. Make sure the adjustable peg tensioners on the corners of the standard vestibule are set to their longest setting and peg the corners down. angle the pegs at about a 45-degree angle to the ground and press them in. Use a rock to press or pound them in if necessary, until only the top of the peg is barely visible. Avoid stepping on the peg to press them into the ground, as this can bend them. Lay out the tent's 5 poles, 4 of which are longer and of equal length. The shorter pole is for the larger vestibule and is marked with red tape near each of its ends. For maximum longevity and durability of your tent poles, it is important that you are careful with them. Make sure that all segments are seated properly and that they don't drift apart while pitching the tent. A small gap can lead to pole breakage. Start with the windward rounding pole, which is number 1 on the diagram. Insert the pole approximately halfway into the pole sleeve, then grip the pole and pull the pole sleeve towards you until the pole end is properly seated in the closed end of the pole sleeve. While holding the pole sleeve, push the pole to arch it fully into the sleeve and place the end of the pole into the pole holder cup, but do not tighten the pole tensioner. Be sure that you place the pole into the correct pole cup by following the black webbing line with pole clips. Repeat this process with the first crossing pole, number 2 on the diagram. Again, insert the pole into the pole sleeve and make sure it is fully seated. Then place the pole into the pole holder cup and leave the pole holder untensioned. Next, insert the other crossing pole, number 3 on the diagram. When inserting your poles, make sure you angle them downward so they slide easily underneath the other pole sleeves. You may need to reach across the top crossing point of the tent and gather the fabric to help feed the pole through the sleeve. Place the pole into the pole holder cup and leave the pole holder untensioned. Push the remaining rounding pole, number 4 on the diagram, through the pole sleeve, seat it fully in the closed end of the sleeve and place the free end into the pole holder cup. Tension the pole holders for both of the rounding poles, number 4 and 1, making sure the pole cup is flush with the bottom of the outer tent wall. Then attach the pole clips onto the exposed part of the poles. Next, tension the pole holders for the crossing poles, number 3 and 2, as you move around the tent, again making sure the pole holder caps are flush with the bottom of the outer tent wall. Lastly, insert the short pole, number 5 on the diagram. This pole is marked with red tape, which corresponds to the red webbing near the opening of the pole sleeve on the larger vestibule. Place the pole end into the pole cup and tension the pole holder. Attach the clips onto the exposed part of the pole. Make sure the peg tensioners on the larger unpegged vestibule are set to their longest settings and use them to lift and pull out the tent, making sure it's straight. Secure the vestibule corners with pegs and tighten the peg tensioners. Adjust the peg tensioners on the standard vestibule end of the tent as well. Here we're pegging the 8 peg points along the perimeter of the tent, which you might not necessarily need to do in fine weather, but it's a good habit to have and to practice. Next, tighten the vent cover. Make sure your vent hoods are properly formed and adjust the windward guy line if needed. As you make your way around the tent, make sure all your guy lines are at the longest setting and peg them out as shown on the diagram. This configuration will provide your tent with the greatest stability. Guy lines work best when they are pegged at their longest setting, but you may need to shorten them because of terrain or pitching site constraints. If you can't use a guy line at its longest length, it's best to attach the line to a peg at a shorter length by using a clove hitch or similar knot around the peg at the desired length rather than using the line runner to shorten it. This way you still have full adjustability from the line runners. The guy line attachment points at the intersection of the rounding poles are longer and should be wrapped around the pole crossing point on both sides of the tent for optimal strength and stability. On the side of the tent with the pole sleeves, wrap this line around the top sleeve only. In fine weather, peg the guy line on the vent cover straight out. In storm conditions, you will wrap this line around the intersection of the rounding poles, which we will demonstrate later. As you work your way around the tent, adjust the guy lines so they have the same degree of tautness. When tensioning the guy lines, don't tighten the line runners so much that they deform the poles, as this can weaken the structure of the tent and can cause pole breakage. While an over-tightened Saivo might not look that bad, the excess tension can still weaken the tent. Make any final adjustment to the guy lines, pegs, pole tensioners, vent cover, and vent hoods, and your Saivo is now fully set up and ready for use. We always recommend that you peg all the tent's peg points and guy lines since weather conditions can change unexpectedly. And practicing these steps every time you pitch your tent means you'll be comfortable with them for a time when you have to do them in rough weather conditions. Overall, rough weather pitching for the Saivo is nearly identical to fine weather pitching, with just some simple adjustments to account for winds. Again, remember that it's important to become familiar with and comfortable in your pitching routine so you're prepared for any conditions, and it's a good idea to take every step to prepare for the worst conditions. In general, it's a good idea to stay low when unpacking and pitching your tent in stormy weather. Just like in fine weather, start by pegging the guy line from the standard vestibule's vent hood into the direction of the wind. You should have already pre-packed this line to be easily accessible. Again, we will demonstrate how to do this in the taking down the Saivo section. Be sure to secure all loose bags so they do not blow away. Then, peg both corners of the standard vestibule end of the tent. The following steps are adjustments that you would make specifically for rough weather conditions. Stretch the tent out and peg the larger vestibule end, but don't tighten the peg tensioners. This will help prevent your tent from blowing around in rough weather. Next, loosely peg out all the guy lines to prevent them from tangling during the rest of the setup and to help secure the tent. On the side of the tent with the pole sleeves, you can wrap the guy line with the longer attachment point and the guy line from the vent cover over the top pole sleeve as you're pegging out the lines. Rather than laying out all the poles in advance, take each pole out only as you need it. You'll follow the same pole order for inserting the poles, tensioning the pole cups and attaching pole clips as you would in fine weather. Again, start with the windward rounding pole, number 1 as seen on the diagram. Continue with the 2 crossing poles, numbers 2 and then number 3. Then the remaining rounding pole, number 4. As you would in fine weather, tension the pole cups and attach the pole clips only after poles 1 through 4 have been inserted. On the side of the tent with the exposed poles, be sure to wrap both the guy line with the longer attachment point and the guy line from the vent cover around the intersection of the rounding poles. And wrap these lines on the pole sleeve side of the tent as well if you didn't already do it while loosely pegging out the guy lines. Lastly, insert the short pole for the larger vestibule, number 5 on the diagram, and tension the pole cap and attach the pole clips. After the poles are inserted, make sure the guy lines are properly tensioned as you work your way around the tent. Ensure the peg tensioners on both ends are adjusted correctly, and finally, peg the entire perimeter of the tent to prevent any wind from coming underneath. Make any final adjustments to the pegs, peg tensioners, pole tensioners, guy lines, vent hoods, and vent cover. Note that the Saivo pole system is designed so you can double pole the tent using 2 poles in each sleeve and clip line. This increases the stability and strength of the tent, but would only ever be needed in very extreme weather conditions. When double poling, alternate the clips between the 2 poles. Using the Saivo. Each of the Saivo's entrances have a red toggle at the base of the zipper that can be inserted into the zipper pole to lock the zipper in windy conditions. For basic use, roll the door and secure it using the first elastic loop and toggle. In good conditions, both vestibules can be rolled partly or completely away. To do this, start by detaching the door band, then unpeg the vestibule corner and the guy line. Next, release the toggle at the top of the zipper and fully unzip the zipper. Now you can roll and secure the door using the second loop and toggle. The vent hood has a flexible wire that can be bent as needed when rolling and folding the door. For both vestibules, you can maximize ventilation and views by unpegging the remaining corner, rolling the entire vestibule aside, and securing it with the elastic loop and toggle along the pole sleeve. If you leave the pegs in the ground, you can simply re-hook the attachment points when unrolling and resetting the vestibule. When resetting your vestibules, be sure to reform your vent hoods. If you want more covered outdoor space, you can pitch a Hilleberg tarp over your vestibule to create a space for gathering or dealing with gear. If you're entering the standard vestibule in rainy weather, you can give yourself extra space by unzipping the door just enough so you can disconnect a few of the toggles connecting the inner tent to the outer tent. Then push the now loose inner tent back. This gives you more dry space to deal with wet gear before going into the inner tent. By disconnecting the inner tent from the outer tent, you can create as much vestibule space as you need. In the inner tent, both doors can be rolled to the side and secured with an elastic loop and toggle or stuffed in a nearby pocket. Both inner tent doors are the same, despite the vestibules being different sizes. Each door is no-see-um mesh backed by a zipper adjustable fabric panel. For maximum airflow, unzip the fabric panel and roll it down and secure it using the elastic loops and hooks. Avoid letting the door panels drag on the ground and/or stepping on them, as dirt and sand will shorten the lifespan of the zipper. It's also a good idea to keep your finger in front of the zipper slider as you close it to prevent it from catching on the fabric. In the inner tent, 12 pockets have plenty of room to keep your small items organized, and webbing loops in the ceiling allow you to easily string a clothesline. Avoid overloading the pockets or the clothesline, as this can pull on the inner tent and decrease performance. Each of the Saivo's vestibules has a large, adjustable vent placed high up and protected by an external hood. The vents have snow-proof fabric panels that allow air to flow freely even when zipped closed, as well as adjustable no-seam mesh panels. 2 vents high up on the roof of the tent share the same venting system, with fabric-backed no-seam mesh panels in the inner tent and air-permeable, snow-proof fabric panels on the outer tent. All vent panels can be rolled in a variety of ways to match your ventilation needs, from fully opened for maximum airflow to fully closed. Using the Saivo Outer tent separately. Using the outer tent on its own provides covered, dry space and plenty of room for more than just 3 or 4 people to gather. Simply detach the inner tent from the outer tent and pitch the outer tent as you would the complete tent. You can also pitch the complete tent and then detach the inner tent by starting at one of the inside corners and disconnecting the inner tent's toggles from the outer tent's rings. If you're planning to reattach the inner tent later, leaving one of the toggles in place and simply tucking the inner tent into the corner will make reattaching it easier. You can use the Saivo Outer tent on its own as your primary shelter if you're trying to have even more space. Combining it with the optional footprint will offer more comfort, but it's still not going to be as comfortable as using it with the inner tent, since the outer tent by itself is not breathable and can therefore sometimes have some condensation. We will cover how to attach the footprint in using the Saivo footprint section. Using the Saivo Inner tent separately. Pitched on its own, the Saivo Inner tent provides excellent lightweight, warm weather bug protection. The inner tent is water repellent but not waterproof, so use it on its own only in dry conditions and when you do not expect bad weather. For protection from rain or sun, you can pitch a tarp over your Saivo Inner tent by using trekking poles, Hilleberg tarp poles, or by suspending it from trees. To pitch the inner tent, you will need 8 pole holders, which are available for purchase separately. You will also need the Saivo's 4 longer poles and 8 of its pegs. After detaching the inner tent, lay it out and attach the pole holders by inserting the toggles of the tent's perimeter into the rings on the pole holders. Note that the Saivo 3 has one short webbing loop with a toggle at each of its corners, which are not used when pitching the inner tent alone. The Saivo 4 does not have these toggles. Start by threading one of the rounding poles, number 1 as seen here on the diagram, through its line of elastic loops. Seat the far end of the pole into its pole holder, then arch the pole fully and place the remaining free end into the pole holder. Repeat this process with the other rounding pole, number 2 on the diagram. At any point where 2 poles intersect, make sure both poles share the same elastic loop. Again, fully seat the far end of the pole in its pole holder, then arch the pole and insert the remaining free end into the pole holder. Next, thread one of the crossing poles, number 3 on the diagram, through its line of elastic loops. Make sure to thread this crossing pole underneath the rounding poles, and at any point where the poles intersect, be sure that both poles share the same elastic loop. This crossing pole should be inserted through the webbing loop at the top crossing point. On the Saivo 4, both crossing poles go through the top webbing loop. On the Saivo 3, the second crossing pole should go under the first. Fully seat the far end of the pole in its pole holder, then arch the pole and insert the remaining free end into the pole holder. Repeat this process with the other crossing pole, number 4 on the diagram, making sure it goes underneath the rounding pole. When inserting your poles, you might need to push the pole from the opposite end to aid it through the elastic loops. Fully seat the far end of the pole in its pole holder, arch the pole, and insert the remaining free end into the pole holder. You should at least peg the 4 pole holders at the corners of the tent, but we encourage you to peg all 8 pole holders around the perimeter. Remember to press the pegs in completely at about 45-degree angle to the ground. Your Saivo Inner tent is now fully set up and ready for use. Using the Saivo footprint. The Saivo footprint covers the inner tent floor and both of the vestibules. The best time to attach the footprint to your tent is indoors before you go out on a trip. Lay your tent out with the floor side up. Position the footprint on top of the tent floor with the logo side towards the floor. Note that the tent's ground straps will be between the tent's floor and the footprints. Start by connecting the footprint's one larger red toggle, which corresponds to the large red ring in the corner of the tent's standard vestibule. Then connect the remaining toggles to the rings around the perimeter of the Saivo's outer tent. The logos on the footprint should align with the center of the outer tent doors. You can leave the footprint attached when you pack the tent. The Saivo's tent bag is sized so that it will easily accommodate the tent and its footprint. Taking down the Saivo. Make sure to brush any debris out of the inner tent and then close the doors before taking down and packing the tent away. When taking down the tent, repeat every step you used to pitch the tent, but in reverse. Start by unpegging the guy lines and perimeter of the tent. Do leave the vent hood guy line on the standard vestibule pegged, which you'll pack away last. As you unpeg your tent, make sure to set all the guy lines and the peg tensioners to their longest lengths. That way, the tent will be fully ready for the next time you pitch it. To remove each pole, detach the clips from the pole, loosen the pole tensioner completely, and remove the pole end from the pole clubs. Then push the poles out from the sleeve ends while holding onto the pole sleeve itself. Never pull a pole out of the sleeve. It can cause the pole sections to separate inside the sleeve, making the pole difficult to remove. In rough weather or windy conditions, you should leave both vestibules and all guy lines loosely pegged. It's a good idea to get the tent as flat as possible while taking out the poles. To do this, once all pole tensioners have been loosened and poles removed from the pole caps, push down on the apex of the tent, making sure the poles flatten and don't get caught on the ground. Once all the poles are removed, fold them and put them into the pole bag. When folding the poles, check to see if they have been damaged. If so, replace the damaged section with the repair pole section located in a pocket inside your pole bag. Place your pegs in the peg bag and store the peg bag inside the pole bag. This helps keep the pegs easily accessible for the next time you pitch your tent. There are 2 options for packing your Saivo into its bag, either folding and rolling it or stuffing it. With either method, make sure you pack the vent hood guy line on the standard vestibule last so it will be easily accessible for the next time you pitch your tent. If you decide to fold and roll your tent, we recommend that you fold the tent so that the floor is left facing outward. Keep the guy lines inside the fold, leaving only the line on the standard vestibule vent hood out. Roll the pole bag into the tent before you put the entire bundle into the tent bag. Then pack the last guy line so it'll be on top of everything else in the bag. That way, it'll be ready to be used right away the next time you pitch your tent. Stuffing the tent is the most efficient method in stormy conditions. Gather and stuff the tent into the bag, leaving the guy line on the standard vestibule vent hood out until the tent is completely in the bag. Again, pack this line last so it will be easily accessible for the next time you pitch your tent. However you decide to pack your tent, make sure you keep track of the last peg and store it in the peg bag. If you stuff your tent, you should stow the poles and pegs in your pack separate from the tent bag. Never stuff the poles into the tent bag. Doing this puts unnecessary strain on the tent fabric and can cause damage over time. At the end of your trip, there are a few steps you can take to extend the lifespan of your tent. You should never store a wet tent for a long period of time. As soon as possible, hang your tent to dry. If you have the space, the ideal way is to put the poles in and hang the complete tent. If you've attached the optional footprint, make sure and detach one corner so both the tent floor and the footprint dry properly. If you have limited space, just make sure the tent hangs long enough and that you rotate it so that it's completely dry between all the layers. Lastly, clean off and dry the pegs and inspect them for any damage. Have a wonderful outing and enjoy the wilderness, but leave as small of an imprint as possible. Leave everything the way you would like to find it on your next trip. Visit Hilleberg.com to see our entire product range and to find more videos with practical tips on using your tent. You can also read more about us, including our history, our philosophy, and how we make our tents.